Welcome to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
We're very pleased to bring you our second program of international visitors who are touring this country studying our political election process. I want to give special recognition and expression of appreciation to the National Council for International Visitors and also the Spokane International Exchange Council. And my appreciation goes to Rebecca Wolf from Spokane for assisting and making these programs possible both last week and again this week. We're very fortunate to have two guests that are visiting our country for the purpose that I indicated. First of all, I would introduce to you Ludwig Sundasha, who is a member of the Central Committee of the Zambia United National Independence Party. It's a very great pleasure to have you in our country and on our campus, and we look forward to discussing this issue with you today.
Thank you very much.
I'm also happy to welcome to the program Jose Vieira, who is a diplomatic correspondent with LUSA News Agency from Portugal. It's a pleasure to have you in our country and on our campus today.
It's also a pleasure for me.
And as always, I'm very happy to have on the panel Steve Schenck, who is the Dean of Community Relations and Development at North Idaho College, and I shall ask Steve to commence the questions today.
Thank you, Tony. I'd like to begin this week, as we did last week, by learning a little bit more about each of you. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to just tell us, and we've heard already in Tony's introduction, briefly what you do, but maybe if you could set the stage and tell us a little bit more about your responsibilities. Frequently, we in this country are criticized for knowing too little about the other nations of the world. So maybe if you could tell us a little about the cities that you work in and your nations as well, I think that would be very helpful. Could we begin with you, Mr. Sondashi?
Yes, thank you. As already pointed out, I'm a member of the Central Committee in my government. Being a member of the Central Committee, so I'm also in charge of a province. I run a province, so I'm a provincial governor, similar to a governor here. My country is divided into provinces. There are 9 provinces, so I'm responsible to ensuring that I run one province. I'm the political and administrative head of that province. Apart from that, my personal experience, and maybe you might want to know my profession. I'm a lawyer by profession, and I was also a city manager before coming into politics.
A good background for this visit. Tell me, if you would, what province is it that you run? What's the population and some of the major features of that area?
The Zambia, as you might know, is thinly populated. It's not as thickly populated as your country. The whole Zambia, we are 7.5 million in my country. My province is roughly 3/4 of a million, and the country is in Southern Africa, and it's a landlocked country. Our main export is copper. We are diversifying our economy to agriculture because of the vulnerability of copper, as you know, the prices going down and so forth. We are a one-party state in Zambia, for your information, and we have a president, of course, and the Central Committee, Central Committee is like cabinet, and then under it there is a cabinet, and also we have a strong judiciary, we have a parliament, unicameral parliamentary system.
Thank you. Mr. Vieira, same question.
Well, I'm, as you said before, I'm a professional journalist. LUSA is a national news agency, and I'm working on the Foreign Affairs department. I'm more or less responsible for the foreign relations of Portugal with other countries, but I also cover some international affairs, mainly East-West relations, European-American relations, and so. And well, I live in Lisbon. That's where the headquarters of my agency are based now. And Lisbon has a population of about 800,000 in the city limits, the administrative city limits, but all the Great Lisbon area, as we call it, has about 2 million people in a total population of 10 million people. Well, we have a parliamentary-based system. We have a government which is headed by the Prime Minister, who is responsible in face of the Parliament. And we have a president, the President of the Republic, who has some constitutional powers, is the head representative of the country. He has the veto capacity, but this veto capacity is overruled every time the Parliament votes by 2/3 margin. And well, we are recent members of the European Community since 1986. We are members of NATO alliance, so we are close friends and allies of the United States. And we enjoy a good reputation among our friends and other allies, because we, even being a small country, because of our history and our language, we enjoy some influence on other parts of the world, for instance Africa, where we have our former colonies, and we are in a good relationship now with them, mainly those those Portuguese-speaking countries like Angola, Mozambique, and Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde, and so on. Well, if I could tell you the picture,
excellent.
Give you the picture.
Now, you two gentlemen, and we interviewed two other visitors last week, are part of a much larger group. I think 30 or 32.
Yeah, we're around 32.
One of our guests last week was a journalist. You're the first professional politician, if I can use that term, that we've talked with. How was this group chosen? Are you volunteers? Did someone approach you and say, would you like to come to the United States to study their political system? How is it that you were selected?
Well, I would say that in my country, we do have the United States information agency. Now, this is the agency which is responsible for coordinating the tours. So the agency approaches the government, proposing that the government sends people to come and study the American system, or to come and observe the presidential race. And this is how it was done, and I was picked to come over to see, because in fact I stood in a better chance myself, because by that time I was the vice chairman. I was actually in a committee which deals with elections, so it was really very important for me to see how elections are conducted in the United States, because I was there before. Because you see, the position I've told you is recent. I was appointed a few months ago. During that time, I was in the elections, so that's how I was picked up to come over.
Was your experience similar?
Well, if you can say so. I had a previous knowledge of the United States, not only because I've been here before, but because I usually write about things related to the United States as a country, or in terms of the relationship with other countries and myself, my own country, I mean. So people, maybe once or twice, I had told people that, well, I would like to go a little further in my knowledge about the United States. But, well, we are a small country and people know each other. I know a lot of people. Maybe I was selected because the U.S. Information Agency, USIA, as in the case of Lusaka in Lisbon, is more or less covering and knowing who is in a position to be selected for it. Maybe I was selected on that purpose.
We have the advantage of having you on our program near the end of your visit after you've been around the country and observed, and that's to our advantage. With that in mind now, please feel free to give us your opinion or your commentary on what you have learned or what you think about our political system since you've been here right at the most crucial time, that is in the last month of our presidential election itself, and also members of Congress, all the House and a third of the Senate's running. I guess I would also add to that question what surprised you, what's been confirmed, just your reactions of our political system. Maybe we can start.
Yes, well, I think it has been an interesting experience for me to come over here for the first time, and firstly, I think that we've benefited a lot to go around, because we haven't just looked at the political process, but we've also been exposed to the American culture. As you know, there are areas like Chapel Hill where we went to live with the Americans in their homes. So we did have learned quite a lot about American culture. The one thing that is about culture, which is apparent, however, is that different with my culture, is that in American culture, I've noticed that there is this individualism sort of living. In my culture, we sort of live in communal setup. We have extended family system, if you like, and each person, the head of a house, is responsible to ensuring that he looks after quite a number of relatives, and they become responsible to him. This is not in your culture. So no wonder, as I would think that if you have to look at the system, you have to understand the Americans from that context. And this is the way I've come to understand you, that because that livelihood which you have, that type of setting, family setting, has influence upon your political process as well. And I think that this is what makes influences even your policies. For instance, Republican policy, I think that it's influenced more largely upon this understanding. Now, I have very, very high impressions about your constitution myself. I think that the constitution lead is one of your best assets you have in this country. And the separation of powers, which is enshrined into the constitution, rigid constitution, makes it possible for the Americans to remain democratic. I do not think myself that that it is more to do with personalities in the government that are democratic, but I think it's the constitution contributes more to the democracy than the individuals in the government. This is the way I look at it, and I think the founders of the Constitution did a great job to put America on the map and leave the Constitution the way it is, where the executive does not wield a lot of powers. I think that is very good, because that is a very good check and balance enshrined in the Constitution.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vieira.
Well, I try to come here without any prejudice, so I would have a more perfect look about this country, and even if I had some global notions about the system and the way it is functioning, I was not aware about a lot of things that are going on both on the national level and the countryside and the local level. And what amazed me the most, maybe, it was to know exactly how people on the what you call the grassroots are dealing with their own lives. And I think, well, beginning with the system, I think it's maybe a good system for you, even if some of us as foreigners don't understand too much about it a lot of times, or if we even disagree with it. But we were talked, and we had that experience during this trip that it functions. So maybe it's good. We had a trip composed mostly of contacts with people on the political side. So because we are covering the campaign and all the issues and so, and we have the different contacts in Washington DC first, where we were at first time with the people in the Congress, close to the administration and so. And from that point we visit different cities, big cities, being part of big states, or just small communities. And I think from what we look, from what we see each day at on the television, and for some of us who have the chance to see it abroad, I mean in Europe, for instance, in my own country, where I have the chance to see some American channels, I couldn't realize that what this country was by that image that is projected to overseas. And for instance, I realized that on the grassroots there is a lot more of debate about issues dealing with the day-to-day life of these people. And on the other side, there is there are big interests involved, and so they are conditioning the way that people express on different levels of, for instance, in relation with these elections. And for instance, I was aware that people on the grassroots, they talk about on the issues and about their problems, their daily problems. And sometimes they are a little more ideologized, and others no, they are just simply expressing themselves. And for instance, during this campaign, what amazed me was the lack of issues sometimes. And for instance, there was also a big business, media business, involving all this. And I think it could be other way, but I'm not an American citizen.
I just wanted to ask too that during this trip, have you been able to attend a political gathering or a political rally where a political candidate spoke, like for example for president?
Well, some of us had that chance because of the schedule they had on their own trip, but because we split in the different occasions. And I myself, I had the experience only on the local level. What the so-called fundraising parties and some small rallies in small communities, but not more than that.
No, I didn't have the opportunity of attending a political rally. No.
Thank you. Steve?
We had an opportunity just before the cameras started to talk a little bit, and one of the points we touched on I'd like to get back to. A feature of national political campaigns and even local elections today in this country is polling. Every week a different organization comes out with a different poll that tells you which candidate is ahead, what issues are important, just about anything you might want to know, and a lot that you don't. Do you see that as a positive thing in our political process, or do you think we rely too much on that? Does it influence the way people think? Mr. Sandashi?
Yes. Yes, I've noticed that you do have this thing. Unfortunately, we don't have it in my country. I think it's because of we don't have the means of conducting polling. But I think that it is a positive mechanism, really, and in an area like this where there are very many states, and the person may not be known by many people. I think you need to have that device. But I'm afraid it would appear to me that although it is helpful, but you see it is influential. I think that quite a number of your people might be influenced by it. Simply when they say if Democratic Party is leading or Republican Party is leading, they say this is leading, many people might be influenced to vote for that party simply because of the poll. So I think that is the negative aspect which I would see it has, and I do not know how much whether it eliminates the margin of error, how much margin of error is it maintains. If it doesn't maintain much error, then I think it is quite helpful. But I think it can also, I don't know. My feeling is that it could be abused. Probably it can be used for political purposes. If there is room for it being abused in that way, then it can be quite harmful because they cannot show the true picture of popularity of candidates.
Mr. Vieira, I'd like your opinion on polling, but also, as a journalist, there are people in this country who would suggest that we package candidates today, that media presentation, the image of a candidate is more important than their experiences or their stance on the issues. Do you think that the media in this country has too much impact on elections?
Yes, they have. This is a big market, big media market, and I think polls are very useful for them, as well as they are for one party, the one who is winning that poll. I can agree with Ludwig in terms of how much influence they can exercise, the polls can exercise on the electorate, mostly on those days just before the election. And for instance, in Portugal, my own country, we have polls, but they cannot be run and the results being delivered since 1 month before the election day, more or less 1 month. It means that that is the official period of the campaign, and the polls cannot be simply cannot be delivered before that. Of course, we journalists we would like to have a lot more of information about how the electorate was reacting towards the different parties and the different candidates and so. But I can understand that in the United States the media organizations are too strong, and they have to be competitive among themselves, and that leads me to the point that sometimes the results of the polls maybe not accurate. For instance, I cannot say that I have a big experience about this country and the way people react. But as I told you before, we had different experiences with different types of people around the country, and sometimes I had no idea that people were behaving this way or another way because I was aware of the results of the polls. In political terms, and that before the election day it was really smashing to me.
In fact, I would add that assuming there is no control over poll, I would suggest that I think there must be some control mechanism to ensure that people are responsible for the polls are answerable, that they must not terrorize, they must not exaggerate. So if one exaggerated, they should be able to punish them. There must be penalties for them.
I just forgot to say, to tell you some other thing related to this, that I also think that the results may be not accurate all the time, because even with those margin of error that they are working with, in this country there is a big number of abstentions, and that for instance I was really astonished with these figures of abstention, because in Europe, for instance, we have turnouts, electoral turnouts of around 60, 70 and 80%. In my own country, the last turnout last year was 17-something%. So here we are dealing with turnouts around 50%. Well, my point is that sometimes having a poll based on those figures maybe not exactly.
In your country, how about the turnout? What percentage usually of the country turns out to vote?
Sometimes it can be every turnout, sometimes it cannot be. Everything depends on issues. I think that is the overriding factor. And also the campaigning itself, the mobilization. In our last presidential elections in '83, I think the poll was 62, somewhere around there, I think.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. We're out of time. We've just enjoyed this so much, and I wish we could continue. And I do want to thank you on behalf of our staff and Steve for being with us, and we hope you will come back to our country at a future date. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to again thank the National Council for International Visitors and the Spokane International Exchange Council for giving us this opportunity both last week and today to visit with the people that are visiting our country and talking about politics here and where they come from. We hope you've enjoyed these programs, and I'd like to invite you to be with us again next week at the same time. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.